I'm Ben Meiselas from Legal AF, joined by my co-host Michael Popok. On this truly historic day, we are going to discuss what went down at the arraignment of Donald Trump today. We'll talk about Donald Trump leaving the Miami Doral Resort, the Trump resort where he occasionally lives at, how he then left there, went to the federal courthouse. The very small crowd, about 500 to 1,000 people who were out there. We'll talk about that scene. We'll talk about what went down inside the courthouse with the magistrate judge, the conditions that were placed, very limited conditions, but nonetheless, it's possible Donald Trump's already violating one of these conditions, and we'll talk and explain that because I saw him speaking to one of the witnesses, which he's not allowed to do, or he was at least in a room with his co-defendant, Walt Nauta. So I'll tease that there. And I think we also got a preview of the various defenses that Donald Trump's lawyers are going to try to put on. Two of Donald Trump's lawyers were seated next to him during the arraignment. Todd Blanche, New York Wall Street white-collar lawyer who also represents Donald Trump in the Manhattan District Attorney matter. Christopher Kise, the lawyer from Florida, who you have to have a local Florida lawyer present. So Chris Kise didn't do the speaking. It was Todd Blanche who did the speaking. Donald Trump pled not guilty. Special counsel Jack Smith was in the room, one of the top counterintelligence lawyers at the DOJ, Jay Bratt, that lawyer was the one who handled the proceedings for the Department of Justice. But special counsel Jack Smith was there. We've got videotape of him arriving in the Miami airport last night. There's Jack Smith right there. And it's being reported that the entire time Jack Smith was making eye contact with Donald Trump during the arraignment until Donald Trump left. Special counsel Jack Smith kept eye contact on Trump, stared at him the entire time. Donald Trump sheepishly was shrugging his shoulders, looking down, and refused to look at special counsel Jack Smith. So giving that framework, let me toss it to my co-host, Michael Popok.
Thanks, Ben. That's a great picture you just painted. We start the day with the arrest, booking, and processing of Donald Trump. For those who don't know, he was under custody, which means he was under arrest, whether he was wearing handcuffs, I almost said cufflinks. If he was wearing handcuffs or not, he was under arrest for that time, under the watchful eye of the federal marshals, the probation department, and of course the Secret Service detail. I doubt he was handcuffed. It wasn't necessary given this context. He came in through the underground garage and processed for about an hour and a half, and then came into the courtroom a few minutes before 3 o'clock Eastern time, joined by two of his lawyers, as you said, Ben, Chris Kise, who's already gotten $5 million from the Save America PAC by Donald Trump to do things up in New York related to the civil fraud case, where his co-counsel there is Alina Habba, but had to get pressed into action at the last minute because despite interviewing a half a dozen well-known white-collar criminal defense lawyers in Miami, most of which I know, all of them said no to the invitation, leaving only Chris Kise, who is a member, there he is there, is a member of the Southern District of Florida. You have to be a member of the bar, of the federal bar in which you are practicing, not just the state in which you're located. And so they pressed him into action. He actually had to move officially for Todd Blanche, the lawyer who also, like Chris Kise, left his major law firm to go out on his own to service one client, Donald Trump. They both have that in common, Chris Kise and Todd Blanche seen here. So the first thing that Chris Kise had to do was to move Todd Blanche in as a special limited admission, what we call pro hoc vice admission, so that he can appear in court. That order ultimately signed by one Eileen Cannon, who approved the pro hoc vice admission, also warned counsel that if they screw up in her courtroom, isn't this ironic? If they screw up in her courtroom and don't appear, and local counsel has to be ready to step in at a moment's time where she's going to revoke the pro hoc vice. That was from Eileen Cannon. But this was not Eileen Cannon's show today. This was the duty judge, the duty magistrate Goodman, who really, this fell to him because, I'm not making this up, Tuesday is his day as the duty magistrate for any business, any court business. And this was a twin arraignment or attempted arraignment. One, Walt Nauta, the body man valet butler, who still works for Donald Trump and is working for him even as we speak at events, including back at Bedminster, still employed, still working side by side. Body man means he's as close to the president in proximity, physical proximity, former president, as possible. That remains. We'll talk about the pretrial release conditions about not talking to witnesses and how that's really going to play out when your boss is talking to Walt Nauta. This is the body man. You can't get any closer than him fixing a shirt collar for Donald Trump, obviously unable to fix his own shirt collar at a golf tournament or wherever they were in Doral. That's Walt Nauta, and that's a problem. Now, Walt Nauta had his own problems in finding local counsel. Nobody wants to touch this case that's credible with a 10-foot pole in Miami. No one. And so Walt Nauta's attorney, Stan Woodward, who's a practicing attorney up in Baltimore, he couldn't find local counsel either. In fact, they couldn't even technically do Walt Nauta's arraignment, which was weird. The magistrate judge let him out under the same conditions as Donald Trump, no bail, no bond, and reset his arraignment for the 27th of January, telling him he can phone it in, and then the magistrate joked, but you won't be arraigned in front of me because it'll be whoever the duty judge is on the 27th of June. So you had that going on. And then you had Jay Bratt representing the government. As you said, Ben, Jack Smith really staring a hole into Donald Trump. If this was like The Boys and a laser beam, it would have taken Donald Trump's head off there, which I thought was a very compelling physical presence to be in the room. The now, he's no longer a myth or a legend. He's a legend, but he's no longer a myth. He exists. He's running the show. He's in the courtroom. And everybody knows it, including Donald Trump, who sat there, as you said, skulking with his arms folded. What did we learn in terms of the bond and bail release? We learned that he's got a requirement now, Donald Trump, not to talk to witnesses, including Walt Nauta, about this case. Now, the magistrate understood how difficult that is and difficult to enforce, frankly. He said, I know that you guys work together, in effect, but you can't talk about this case, and you can't talk to other witnesses that the special counsel's office will identify to you at a later time. Those witnesses you can't talk to either. But how the government polices this and how any magistrate polices this, considering literally Walt Nauta is right now shining Donald Trump's shoes, is very, very difficult. And I want to hear your opinion on that. While that was going on inside the courtroom, and no new date yet set that we know of for motion practice in the future, certainly the trial has not been set. That will all be at a later time. This was really for arraignment, the reading of the 31 counts against Donald Trump, and having him acknowledge and plead not guilty, or as the lawyer Chris Keiss said. Blanche, we absolutely affirmatively plead not guilty, as if that matters. And we just take that down with a check of a box. Okay, not guilty, great. And that was the end of the proceeding. What was your observations, Ben, of what we've learned so far about what transpired in a 30-minute or so arraignment?
Well, here are kind of the highlights. He pled not guilty. The lawyers for Donald Trump waived reading of the indictment, so it was a fairly quick proceeding. Special counsel Jack Smith, the team there on behalf of the DOJ, did not make any requests about travel restrictions. And I think they did it for a specific reason. I think they realized that the limited restriction that Donald Trump has, which is for Donald Trump a big one because he violates all of the rules, specifically that Trump can have no contact with any of the witnesses, including his co-defendant and aide Walt Nauta, who he was eating with at the BLT restaurant last night, and who, by the way, after this arraignment took place, Donald Trump, I think we all saw him at a famous Cuban restaurant in Miami, and I saw Walt Nauta basically standing within 5 feet of Donald Trump, which may be a violation of this order already. to your point, ultimately, how is that going to be enforced? Is it going to have to be by communication or whatever? But I think, does it have to be actually, them speaking? Is it they can't have any contact? They can't be in the same room or in the same vicinity. They are allowed to communicate, though, through lawyers, can have communications with the other lawyers of witnesses, like Walt Nauta's lawyer. I guess when he gets a Florida lawyer, he's got a lawyer from the other state who you mentioned could contact Donald Trump's lawyer and they could speak that way. But Trump didn't need to surrender his passport. There was no limit on international travel, no limit on firearms, but the restriction on no contact with witnesses. And think about who the witnesses are, though. Like, all of the people who we've talked about on Legal AF and on the other MeidasTouch shows who have went before the grand jury, right? We're talking about people like Alina Habba. She's a witness, right? Christina Bobb. She's a witness. She was the one who signed the attestation under penalty of perjury, telling the Department of Justice that all classified information and top secret information and sensitive compartmented information was all returned on June 3rd, when it absolutely wasn't returned. So she's a witness. Evan Corcoran, Donald Trump's other lawyer, is a witness. All the staff at Mar-a-Lago, from the maintenance worker to the servers at the restaurant, right? Those are types of people who went before the grand jury. The people who handle the surveillance footage all the way through the Trump organization with Calamari Sr. and Calamari Jr. I mean, they're witnesses. So ultimately, fleshing out how that is going to play itself out is something that interests me and intrigues me. And also, one of my overall observations, again, was a very small crowd in front of the courthouse, not the type of crowd that I think Donald Trump would have wanted, and a crowd kind of filled mostly with some of the kind of super ultra MAGA crazy people. There was one person who had like a pole with a dead pig's head on it. You had a few older women who were, I guess, Trump supporters wearing shirts that said like "Blacks for Trump 2020." Older white women wearing that shirt, and so it was a kind of the kind of circus MAGA crowd that was there. That's the with the backwards Trump flag, and it was that kind of crew who was there, and that is the modern day Republican Party. This photo that we're showing you right now is one of the people who wears the American flag, a guy wearing it as a dress with a stick that has a big tall stick with a dead pig's head on it. I mean, like what in the world is going on there? But in all the Trump flag type stuff. But we're talking about a crowd of about 500 to 1,000 people, not a big crowd, very kind of low energy. I think good that it was uneventful. I think there was a few counter protesters ultimately who were arrested. But those are my big takeaways. And of course, that special counsel Jack Smith was there, and the reporting that Jack Smith was staring at Donald Trump the entire time, staring at him, and Donald Trump, like, for all of his bravado and bluster, Trump looked frustrated throughout his arraignment. He folded his arms and refolded his arms throughout with a constant frown on his face, is how Hugo Lowell, reporter from The Guardian, described it. And we've always said this on Legal AF, like, when you confront the traitor, when you confront the bully, Donald Trump actually is a very scared, cowardly individual and always backs down. Those are my big observations, Michael Popok.
Yeah, I think there's two campaigns that are now going on simultaneously, as Maggie Haberman of the New York Times also reported. One of them is Donald Trump just keeping up his arranged, staged public appearances even after coming out of the courthouse. I've been to that restaurant on Calle Ocho on 8th Street in Miami. It is the epicenter of the Cuban exile community. I've been to Versailles, the restaurant where he ended up today. Used to be one of my favorite restaurants. It may no longer be. But that was all staged for him to have some buoyant rally-like experience just on the way out before he hit the airport. This is actually quite near the airport in Miami. And stopped off there with, people praying for him. And if I had to pick one place in Miami where people would break into even spontaneous cheering for Donald Trump, this would probably be it. the Republican Party has done a great job over the last 10 years at convincing the Cuban exile community, who haven't supported a Democrat since the Bay of Pigs and after John F. Kennedy, that all Democrats are Marxists, socialists, and communists. And so that is a place where you're going to get a group of people like that spontaneously to do the things that we saw. That's campaign number one. We'll see Bedminster later today. They've already set up flag bunting and white chairs for another rally they're going to be doing tonight. I assure you, this prayer that you're now seeing a photograph of, I've seen it on YouTube. It was all in Spanish. Donald Trump doesn't know a word this guy is saying to him until he said amen, and everybody clapped and applauded. And then the second campaign is this floating out all these nonsense defenses that's I guess sound good in sound bites on right-wing media reporting, but will not work inside of the courtroom. Just to show how that works, Alina Habba was the head clown in the circus outside of the courthouse today. She wasn't anywhere near inside the courtroom doing any real legal work. This is a perfect example of what we're talking about. There is the charade of what's going on TV and on the street, led by people like Alina Habba and Carrie Lake, and there's the reality of the justice system that's going on inside of a courtroom. So these defenses are just made up paper defenses that won't work. First one is that here's Alina Habba with her white outfit, obviously staged, doing her best legal work on the sidewalk in front of the courthouse. That's where she belongs, and that's where she should stay. So the first one is that the attorney-client privilege that two federal judges, chief judges of the D.C. Circuit Court, stripped from Donald Trump related to people like Evan Corcoran. Evan Corcoran is going to be a lead witness in front of a jury at the appropriate time, a former lawyer for Donald Trump, head lawyer for all things Mar-a-Lago. It's not just his notes that he took that are now in Jack Smith's hands, or the audio that he recorded of himself talking about his own case. He is going to testify live against Donald Trump at the appropriate time. And so they want to attack the attorney-client privilege having been stripped. But two federal judges, after a hearing, found that the crime fraud exception applied because Donald Trump, at least one of them found, Donald Trump was more likely than not having committed a crime in using his lawyer and misusing his lawyer in the Mar-a-Lago document retention, search, and secreting issue. And Donald Trump had every opportunity to take an appeal. Sometimes he took appeals on these issues and lost. Sometimes he didn't take appeals and waived, and the Supreme Court didn't step in. So this is, as far as I'm concerned, a boulder dash. This is just for people who aren't taking advantage of the followers of Donald Trump, who don't read the indictment, who don't know anything other than what they're spoon-fed and it's plugged directly into their brain, and that's all they understand. So they're taking advantage of gullible people. That's not going to work, that defense. Second one is selective prosecution. It's a whole bunch of whataboutism. What about Pence? What about Biden and the garage door that goes up and down? What about Obama and all the documents he took for his presidential library? This has nothing to do with the documents that are found inadvertently in somebody's garage. It has to do with hiding, obstructing, secreting, and having a conspiracy to hold your documents that don't belong to you and belong to the American people. And that is what the crime is. As I've said before, it's not about the cookie jars in your house. It's about your hand being caught in the cookie jar. And that's the difference. So that's the second one. Selective prosecution, whataboutism. That's going to fail as well. And so there's a third one, though, Ben, that I've talked about, that they're floating left and right. Let me see if I can pull it.
The prosecutorial misconduct?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. So this is the one I did a hot take on. I think you mentioned it as well. You've got this BS story that Jay Bratt, who's going to be the lead trial lawyer, apparently, here he is, for the great glasses, for the government, for the prosecution, who's also the head counterintelligence lawyer for the Department of Justice. He's going to take the lead in this case. He had a meeting. It's public. He had a meeting with the lawyer that was in the courtroom today for Walt Nauta, Stan Woodward, a lawyer, pretty well respected up in Baltimore in a small boutique shop that does criminal defense work, usually on the right wing side. And he says, the lawyer says that during their initial meeting to talk about Walt Nauta testifying on behalf of the government against Donald Trump or get indicted yourself, which is what happened. Great work by the lawyer there. That they said, well, listen, I don't know much about you, but I did a little of my own research before you came in. Totally appropriate. I see, you're a local lawyer. I'm surprised. I don't see you as a Trumper. I'm surprised you're really getting involved with this. And by the way, I also see that you're running for a municipal judge. Is that you want to be a municipal judge? They took that to mean that Jay Bratt was trying to bribe Stan Woodward, who wrote a letter and objected to this to a judge and said, I felt like I was being bribed, that if I didn't play ball with the government and make my client cooperate, that I was going to be denied a municipal judgeship. Okay, newsflash, prosecutors don't have any sway over who gets picked as a municipal judge, and neither does Joe Biden in that regard. So I don't know what pressure you thought you were under. And secondly, all they wanted you to do was to have your client cooperate to avoid being indicted. And you didn't do that, and instead your client got indicted. And now that we've seen the evidence in the indictment related to your client, you should have cut that deal. This is me talking now to Stan Woodward. So this whole, the prosecutorial misconduct, nothing that I have read or heard about that interaction between Jay Bratt, his team, and the lawyer for Walt Nauta rises the level of prosecutorial misconduct to overcome the mountain of evidence which is just a small part that's listed chapter and verse in the indictment.
Well, and here's the one final point, though, that I think is important with all of what we believe to be defenses that totally completely, utterly lack merit. As of right now, Judge Eileen Cannon is still the judge presiding over this matter. As you mentioned earlier in this video, Judge Eileen Cannon has already made orders regarding pro hoc vice applications, the ability for out-of-state lawyers to participate in state. She's issued orders that are instructive in nature, no real kind of substantive order yet. But normally when a judge would self-recuse, they would do that before they issue any orders. So the fact that she's issuing orders, I think, is a signal that she's not going to recuse herself. That's the only way you could read that with all of the available data. However,
can I ask you a question on that?
Yep.
I want to get your view on that. When do you think the government moves to disqualify her? Do they wait for the first bad decision, or do they do that when before the first appearance in front of her?
I think they would do that sooner than later. You don't want to make yourself vulnerable to kind of a laches defense that you've kind of sat on it. So, whether there's a time limit, and I'd have to go into the local rules as well to see if there's local rules requirements. Within the local rules, there's district rules requirement. But overall, I don't think the Department of Justice would wait. That's something that they would promptly file before their first appearance before the federal judge. And
I agree with you.
I think they have a little time because this was just before the magistrate but before they file any substantive motion or do anything there. That's what I'm going to be looking out for. That decision, I believe, would be appealable to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. We've talked about the case United States versus Martin, which talks about a situation of disqualification where the judge was overturned multiple times by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. But I just think Special Counsel Jack Smith is weighing whether or not filing that right now makes sense, or do you, because this involves classified records and there's going to be a lot of decisions that are being made regarding SIPA, the Classified Information Procedures Act, uniquely in those situations, a lot of those decisions are appealable to the 11th Circuit. So there is a situation here where if she makes bad orders regarding the various SIPA related issues about how classified information is handled, that may trigger this U.S. versus Martin case law as well. So I still say this, that Special Counsel Jack Smith has done everything beyond diligently. And so I still have full confidence right now in this prosecution regardless. But, we will keep everybody posted. Yeah. Final words, Michael Popok, before we go.
Yeah, on the canon things, I know it's very, very troubling and agitating to our audience. So I think you're right. The reason I think you're right is that you don't want to walk into that line of cases that says bad decisions that you're getting is not bias. They already have now, based on the prior 2 bad rulings in which she interfered with the ongoing criminal investigation at the search warrant level, which the 11th Circuit told her that was you're not supposed to do that ever, and also the subsequent one about the special master that she established to look through the boxes of documents unclassified, as if that would give Donald Trump any relief at that a moment before he was even a criminal target, let alone now an indicted arrested defendant. Based on, as you said, those twin things, they already have the grounds now. I think they're just waiting. I don't think they're going to wait for, hey, let's see what happens when the other side files a motion to dismiss the indictment and we get a bad ruling. Because I think you're right. I think you want to go under the Martin line of cases, not the other line of cases about, oh, I just got a bad ruling, so now I'm throwing a temper tantrum trying to get rid of my judge. Because that's not what the Department of Justice would be doing here. They have grounds now to have her recused and disqualified.
Thank you, everybody, for watching this update on all that happened during the arraignment, all that we know up until this point. Of course, this is a rapidly moving breaking news story. So as news develops, make sure you're subscribed to the MeidasTouch Network. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Legal AF podcast, wherever podcasts are available. As soon as we get our hands on the transcript of the proceedings, we will make sure that we do a video on that. We'll read the full transcript to you, or as much of it as we can. And thank you again for watching this. Hit subscribe on our YouTube channel right now. And again, a special shout out to the Meidas Mighty. Have a great day.
Lock him up! Indictment season is upon us. Celebrate with the new Indictment Season t-shirt and v-neck exclusively at store.meidastouch.com.